to the Building Your Brand podcast, and I'm doing something a little bit different for the next 12 weeks, in fact, and I'm going to be doing a series of solo episodes. Now, if you are a long-time listener to the podcast, you'll know that I do solo episodes every now and then, but mostly I interview guests. But in the summer, I like to shake things up a bit and do something a bit different. And I was chatting to someone the other day about how I don't always get the opportunity to share my experiences or my expertise on the podcast because I'm always interviewing other people. And obviously, I get to share a bit, but I thought it'd be nice to do this over the summer. So yeah, for the next 12 weeks, I'm going to be covering all different topics. The episodes are going to be a bit shorter. I'm going to be aiming for sort of 10 to 15 minutes, but hopefully you will find them really interesting. And I have quite a juicy topic, I think, for the first episode, and that is about my experience of working with Adobe. Now, as usual, what I did was I posted on social media asking people what they wanted to hear me talk about, and this was one of the topics that came up. And then I also asked people for questions, and so I've got a whole list of questions here in front of me that I'm going to try and work my way through. So first up, how I started working with them. Now, I've definitely told this story multiple times before, so I'll try and keep it succinct. But basically, about 3 or 4 years ago, must have been a year after I started this podcast, I shared a story on my Instagram stories, basically saying I was looking for podcast sponsors. Now, this is a huge lesson to me in remembering that you never know who's watching, you don't know who's following you, and exciting things can happen at any point in your business. Because basically what happened was I got a DM from someone being like, oh, hey Liz, I'm interested in more information. Could you send it over to me? And I was like, yeah, sure. Let me know your email address and I'll send over a slide deck. And his email address was his name at adobe.com. So cue me having a total freak out because at that point I didn't even have a slide deck. So I quickly put together a slide deck and I sent it over to him. And to be honest, I wasn't expecting to hear anything back from that because at that point my podcast was still pretty small. And I was like, okay, let's be honest, Adobe probably are going to want to sponsor it. But that was a correct assessment. They didn't get back to me about the podcast, but unbeknownst to me, he then recommended me to one of his colleagues. So they were setting up an ambassador program and he suggested me to them and said that, the type of content that I make, it would be absolutely perfect. So it was an ambassador program for Adobe Express specifically. And so then I got an email from someone else from Adobe basically being like, hey Liz, we'd love to chat to you about becoming an ambassador. Would you be free for a call? And I have to admit, I did for a second think, hang on a minute, is this spam? Because I didn't actually connect the two incidents together. It was only after I spoke to them that they were like, oh, our colleague recommended you. Anyway, I had a meeting with them. It was great. It all sounded really, really good. It was right at the beginning of them starting up the ambassador program. So I guess there was sort of an element of let's see how it goes. Initially, they said it would be for a year, but I am now on year 4. So it ended up being a lot longer than that. And the goal of the ambassador program was to create this sort of community of ambassadors who would regularly create content promoting Adobe Express. So that was how it started. And as an ambassador, there was sort of a certain amount of content that was required. So I think there was actually, I don't think there was a minimum of how much content you can make at that point, but there was a maximum. So you could do up to 2 ads a month at that point. And so they had a hub. So this website online where you would log in, you could interact with other ambassadors. So there was a chat forum kind of thing. And then challenges would pop up in there and then you could apply for them. And then you would go away and you'd make the content, you'd post it, and then you would submit your invoice and also your stats for your social media account. And I had an amazing experience. I mean, I'm still having an amazing experience being part of that ambassador program. It's been so good for me. I think the reason that it worked so well is that it aligned really well with my target audience. So, I mean, I don't always get this perfect, but the goal of my content in general is supporting and helping small business owners. And that was very much who they were targeting with this tool because Adobe Express is sort of meant to be a more accessible, easier to use version of the Adobe tools. So very much aimed at non-designers. I mean, they do aim it at designers as well because it can be really useful for them, but it is meant for people who maybe don't know how to use all the other Adobe tools. So yeah, that worked really well. It felt like it aligned really well. And so it was a very easy yes for me. And honestly, I mean, I'm still working with them 4 years later, and I have had a really, really good experience. What has since happened is that I have then been recommended to other teams and other departments to work on other projects. So the first one was I was recommended to the Adobe Live team. And for about a year, I had a weekly show on Adobe Live where I'd do half an hour, and it was all about Adobe Express. So we'd work through a project together. I'd show people how to do things, showcase new features, give them templates that they could use. And that was a really fun experience. And one of the questions I had was what it was like, or what it is like behind the scenes of Adobe Live. I don't do Adobe Live as often anymore, but when I was doing my weekly show, it was honestly so fun. So basically the way it would work is I would be on Zoom with, I guess, the show producer, you'd call it, their tech guy. He would be running the whole thing. So he'd be setting it live. He'd be monitoring the chat. I'd also have earphones in, and he could talk to me and no one on the stream would hear it if there was anything that he needed to tell me. So that wouldn't happen very often because honestly, it would have got very distracted if he was just chatting to me in my ear while I was trying to show people how to do things. It was already a lot to manage, just designing something, talking through what I was designing, checking the chat, interacting with people. But it just meant that like if something had gone wrong, or there was one time where I lost a tool completely and he just sort of whispered into my ear where it had been moved to. So things like that. So that's how that process would work. The Adobe Live community was incredible. I actually met quite a lot of them in real life now. So there was like a regular group of people who would show up in the chat. There'd be in jokes. There would be like, everyone was so friendly, so encouraging. And you know what? There was loads of things that went wrong for me. I think this is common for everybody. I felt like I was working through like a bingo list of things that could go wrong on a live stream. So examples, there was one time someone in the chat made a joke and I didn't get it for ages. And then you can probably watch back the live stream and see me suddenly like getting the joke. I mean, that's very on brand for me. There was a time that I tipped a whole glass of water all over myself, but I just had to keep going. One time I made the mistake of wearing wireless earphones and they ran out of battery. So I had to sort of like try to subtly change out my earphones. I mean, there was so many things. I'd like to say that most of them went very smoothly. These are just a handful of things that went wrong, but it was a really good experience. And they still do regular live streaming. I think they do it more from studios now. So whether that's in the US or whether that's in Munich, but it's a really fun experience and very, very sort of unique scenario to be designing something live while people are watching. So I learned a lot from doing that. And I think having a podcast definitely helped with it. And also I think it gave me lots of confidence. So another question that I had was, what have I got out of working with Adobe? So obviously there's the financial benefits. Another question I had was, do I get paid? Yes, I get paid. I've always been very happy with the amount that Adobe have paid me. Sometimes they'll come to me and say, here's our budget. Are you happy to do this project? And I usually say yes. Sometimes they will ask me to give a quote for a particular project, and then I'll do that. So it works in different ways. So there's obviously the financial benefit. And I think what I have found is that it's just given me a level of consistency in terms of income, because the income has been pretty steady over the last 4 years. It's not steady in the sense that I don't get a set amount each month, but they do send regular work my way. And so it has ended up being pretty steady, sort of like over a year, say, which is really nice. The other huge thing has been the friends that I've made. I've met incredible people through going to events with Adobe. I've made some friends who have become like genuinely such close friends. Like Nikki McWilliams, who you might have come across. We became friends through being ambassadors together, and we've now been on so many trips together. We chat most days. We sort of support each other through our businesses and just give each other advice, and that's been incredible. But there's like loads of friends like that, loads of people that I've got to meet. I've got to meet some of my absolute design heroes at events. Like Adobe Max, which has been incredible. I get so much inspiration for people to invite onto the podcast. So definitely I would sort of thank Adobe for me being able to ask those people to be on my podcast. And ultimately I just had loads of opportunities that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So they have really sort of trusted me in lots of different ways. I guess a big one has been public speaking. So I've spoken at a lot of their smaller events. So they do an event in the UK called Marketing Arcade. I've done talks at those. I've spoken at content circles on a panel. And then earlier this year, absolute dream, I got to speak at Adobe Max London. And in October, I'm speaking at Adobe Max in LA, which I'm really excited about. So those have been incredible experiences. I had a question about what it was like speaking at Adobe Max, so I'll answer that one in a minute. The other opportunities that have come my way, other ways of growing my profile. So I had an amazing double spread feature in the Guardian magazine. So it was an ad that Adobe Express, pay a spread that they paid for, and a journalist interviewed me. And I wasn't totally sure, what it was going to be like, but it was basically this double page spread of me sharing my branding tips, which was incredible. And it had a picture of me, it named me. So that was really amazing. So that was online and in print. So yeah, opportunities like that come up all the time. I'm trying to think if there's any others that I've missed. I also get to do lots of training in Adobe Express for other businesses. So I don't talk about that one as much, but that sort of takes on behind the scenes. So Adobe will ask me to go and, deliver a training to a company that is a client of theirs who's sort of bought a whole load of licenses in Adobe Express and needs training in how to use it. Okay, so let me check out some of the other questions that I was asked. So let's go back to what it was like speaking at Adobe Max. I mean, it was huge. That felt like a really big deal to me. The amount of money, effort, energy that goes to putting on an Adobe Max. If you've ever been, it's an incredible experience. It's very high production. Like there's just so much attention to detail. It's an amazing event. And so it felt like a really huge deal that they trusted me to speak at one of those events. And it was really incredible. Like I put in a lot of work prepping my talks. So I did 2 talks at Adobe Max London, but neither of them were on my own. So they were with other people. So one of them was with Andy Lambert, who has been a guest on the podcast actually. And that session was more demo-like. So basically we went between the 2 of us and we ran through like a whole project, which was really fun. And then the other one was with Bart Vanderveel, who's also amazing. And he basically did, I think it was like 40 minutes of demo. And then I did 20 minutes of talking. So that was where I was sort of just standing up talking with slides rather than demoing. So yeah, I did a lot of rehearsing. I was nervous, but in like a good amount of nervous. Like I wasn't nervous that I felt like, I'm not going to be able to do this. But I was nervous, in a kind of like, okay, this is a big deal. This is probably the biggest, definitely the biggest speaking gig I've ever done. So yeah, that was a bit behind the scenes. And yeah, I mean, I feel very lucky that I'm going to get to do it again because it was an amazing experience. Someone asked me, how has it changed my business plan and direction? So I don't think it changed my business plan in the sense that, as I mentioned, it was really aligned with who I was talking to anyway. So it felt like it fitted really well. I think the way that it has changed my business is I work with small business owners who don't often have huge budgets. Adobe has bigger budgets for the projects that they ask me to work on. So I think it's just taken the pressure off slightly of needing to find a certain number of clients. So I absolutely still work with clients, and that's really important to me. And that's like the main chunk of what I do is creating branding for small business owners. But it's just nice. I like the variety of having different things to do, of making content. I really enjoy editing videos. I find that really creative. I love public speaking. So having these opportunities to express my creativity in other ways is great. But, my business is still branding for small businesses. So it hasn't changed my business plan in that sense. I think it's just diversified the makeup of my income, should we say. Okay, someone else asked, are there any restrictions on what I can say, or can I be honest? I don't think I've ever had this sort of conversation with them. So with the Ambassador program, you get a lot of freedom. So they don't check the videos or the captions before they go out. We just post them. I'm sure if I started saying loads of negative things, that would impact sort of my standing as an ambassador. But they definitely don't sort of police what I can say. there have been instances, and this was actually another question. Another question was, have they ever asked you to do something that wasn't aligned with your values? I don't think they've ever asked me to do something that wasn't aligned with my values, but there has been instances where maybe they've got a new tool that they want me to promote, but it's just not something that I would use. Like it just didn't feel like it was the right tool for my particular audience. And in those instances, I've just gone back and said, like, I don't think this is going to work. And I was a bit nervous about that, but actually they were amazing about it. And they just came back and were like, no problem. Why don't you talk about this tool instead? And it was a tool that made so much more sense for me personally and how I use the tools. So that was really great, because I do other content that's not just Adobe Express, and that's not part of the Ambassador program, and it's with a different team. So that's how that works. I mean, I'm sure if I suddenly started trashing Adobe, they're not going to want me to be an ambassador anymore. But, it's a tool that I use every single day. It's a tool that has helped me to grow my business. It's a tool that helps me, all the tools, Creative Cloud, those are the tools that allow me to make money in my business. So it felt very aligned to work with them, because it is what I use every single day, pretty much. One of the things that I do really like is that there isn't an exclusivity clause. So if I want to promote other tools that I use, I'm totally allowed to do that, even if they are competitors. And I know not all brands do that. Like some do have quite strict exclusivity clauses. Other brands that I've worked with have had quite strict clauses like that. So I appreciate that from them, that I don't have to be exclusive. Someone else asked, is it as intimidating as it seems? I think once you are part of the community, it's not intimidating. I think Adobe do community really well, and they're really good at bringing people together. They're so encouraging. Like I've had just such a great experience with all the people that I've worked with at Adobe who've really championed me, encouraged me in my creativity, have really inspired me. I do think that if you're not in it, it could look quite intimidating. I think the area where it is intimidating for me is that occasionally I'm like, oh my goodness, Adobe have asked me to do this thing and I want to do a really good job. Like I want to do it really well because it's a big brand, it has a big profile. So I think sometimes I personally get intimidated when I'm like, okay, this is big. This is a big deal and I need to do a really good job. Another question I had was, is it actually fun? Yes. Like one of my big values for my business is fun, and I am determined to have fun as I run my business. And honestly, if it wasn't fun, I don't think I would keep going with it. I really enjoy making content. I enjoy making videos. I really enjoy expressing my creativity in that way. And I love going to the events that they run. I love meeting other creative people from all over the world. It's really opened my horizons and sort of introduced me to the design community in a whole different way. And I've got to meet loads of amazing people. So for me, I find it really fun. Another question which I really liked was, what are the biggest pros and cons? I think I've covered the pros loads. I'll be honest, there aren't many cons for me. I think one of the cons is that often, and I don't know exactly, what's going on behind the scenes with this, but often they'll have sort of quite a tight turnaround for a project. So maybe they'll get in touch with me and that, they want to work on something, but it needs to be done really soon. And I think often that's to do with sort of budgets and restrictions that they have behind the scenes. So sometimes I wish I had a bit longer to work on the projects that I'm doing for them. But if I can always turn things down. I can always say, no, I don't have capacity for that right now. I guess that's one of the beauties of being self-employed and working for myself, is that I can always say no if I want to. And, I will do my best to try and fit it in and try and do it if I can, because I genuinely really enjoy working with them. But yeah, I guess that is one of the cons. While I can say no, I often don't want to say no. So I will try and, fit things in. I'll stay up late to get things done, to hit deadlines and stuff like that. So I think that would be the only con. I know that a lot of people are interested in working with them as well. And actually they have recently set up a page, which I will link in the show notes. where you can apply to be an Adobe Express Ambassador. I can't recommend it enough. But if you want to ask me any more specific questions, then feel free to drop me a message on Instagram. You can find me at Liz M. Mosley. I'm very happy for you to ask questions, and I will do my best to answer them. I hope you found that interesting. I think this one will definitely have ended up being more than 10 minutes, but hopefully it answered a bunch of your questions about behind the scenes of working with Adobe. I'm really looking forward to doing lots more episodes like this on a whole variety of topics. So some of them are going to be branding tips and advice, so me sharing my expertise. And then some of them are going to be more like this, a bit more behind the scenes of my business and the kind of work that I do with people. I'll be doing an update on the rejection challenge. So come back next week to find out what my next topic to discuss is. And also, I do still have some slots. So if you have any ideas for topics that you would like to hear me talk about, then do feel free to message me. Feel free to DM me. I would love to hear your suggestions. It's always nice to create content and create podcast episodes around things that people have asked for and they will actually want to hear about. So yeah, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you'll join me for the rest of this summer series.